You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
You're listening to the Full Count Major League Baseball podcast, your local source for trending Major League Baseball topics, season analysis, fun, objective discussions, and up-to-date coverage of the Toronto Blue Jays organization from right here in the Niagara region. Here are your hosts, Brandon Caputo, Reece and Colin Ward.
Welcome back, baseball fans, to another episode of the Full Count MLB podcast right here in the Armchair GM Sports Network, your March 15th, 2021 edition. Your source North American sports coverage by sports fans for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. You can find us on social media for updates, giveaways, and sponsorship promo codes by following the podcast on Twitter at Armchair GM Pod, as well as this show's podcast at AGM Full Count Pod. Make sure you're following us there for all baseball updates on our shows there. As well, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. As well, you can listen to us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Deezer by searching the Armchair GM Sports Network, of course. And lastly, our beautiful user-friendly website, armchairgmsports.com, for all things regarding our network, including articles, podcast episodes, sponsors, and contributors. Everything's on there for you guys. Please go and check that out, and please give us a like and smash that subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to us right now. As always, I'm one of your hosts of the Full Count MLB podcast. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter at Caputs13 of the Canadian Zed. And I'm always very pleased to be joined on the baseball portion of the network by my two co-hosts. First, he is the president, El Presidente of the Left-Handed Catcher Association. He is.
Ooh, I like that.
He is Colin. He is Colin Ward. You can follow him on Twitter at ColinWard_14. How many applications have you had since last week's show for this Left-Handed Catchers Association?
We had a follow. So that's big.
And on the other side of it, we are joined by former technical producer at TSN 1150. He is Reece Dumaney. You can follow him on Twitter at Reece Dumaney. Reece, another week, another Detroit Tigers rib, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's not a good start
to
the show as we're talking right now. The Blue Jays took a 1-0 lead because Matthew Boyd sucks.
So. Hey, thanks for David Price.
That is a sign of things to come.
That deal worked out.
Yes, sure.
Why, you guys didn't win the World Series?
I mean, went far. I guess we went far enough. I mean,
is Daniel Norris
far enough? He says. So that's the ceiling for Blue Jays.
Okay,
we went
far enough.
That's a win.
Okay, yeah. At least hey, if you don't go to the World Series, I guess we can choke. So that was okay. As we get the shot.
Is Daniel Norris even on the Tigers organization anymore?
What's that?
Yeah,
is Daniel Norris still in the Tigers organization?
Yeah, he looks good this spring.
Wow. He was like I remember him being like the prize piece in that trade.
Yeah, he's definitely the second guy behind Matthew Boyd, just because Boyd is actually a starter, where Norris is more of a opener / long reliever. Opener, stupidest thing ever. I hate the opener. But
that's where. Hey,
that's basically
is the opener worse than looking at batting average?
That might be a poll for next week. We got our poll
think
idea. For
batting average is still bad. I mean, the opener. I mean, Nate Pearson's probably going to be an opener for the Jays, so he barely pitch when he first comes back.
Speaking of polls, the poll from last week that we posted again. Follow us at AGM Full Count Pod. We're always posting polls there every week that we read on the show. So, which of these MLB type trades would make you feel most insulted as a player? And again, the options were team trades you for cash, team trades you for player to be named later, or team trades you plus cash. And team trades you plus cash was the winner, as Colin had predicted.
That would be the worst way to get traded, though.
100% it would be.
That would have to be the worst trade. The old Moneyball line. The Yankees are paying your salary. They're paying you to play against them. That's the best quote.
I don't know.
It's not the best quote in baseball, but it's one of the best quotes in baseball.
I'm still on the player to be named later train. I don't know, like, because what are you gonna get in return? Like a player to be named later? Like you're that bad that you don't even get, like, they don't even care. They're just like, we'll give him to you and we'll figure it out later.
That player to be named later also could be a 40th round pick. That's a big slap in the face.
Yeah,
but the player to be named later, if you have a successful time with your new team, can be someone decent.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see about that. I mean, how many times have you actually remembered the player to be named later that was traded for somebody? Because I can't remember.
Griffin Conine is a decent pick for Jonathan VR. That deal bit the Jays. Yeah. I mean, it didn't bite the Jays in a way because they have so many depth guys coming up in the middle infield. I mean, Austin Martin coming up, and Jordan Grosh, and so those guys kind of passed Griffin Conine. I mean, Austin Martin's going to be the guy at second base, I think, after Semien. So,
yeah, I mean, Simeon's he's a rental for the next couple of years.
Speaking of that, let's get into that. Let's get into that in our first segment today, which is brought to you by J&L Flooring, a Niagara-based specialty flooring and design company. Simplified processes and making homes beautiful are their specialties. Visit them at jnlflooring.com to start today on the floor of your dreams. Speaking of in your dreams, I guess some of these teams got their dream free agents this offseason. And Reece, let's take a look at the top here. Obviously, George Springer, JT Realmuto, Trevor Bauer, and DJ LeMahieu re-signing with the Yankees are obviously the most expensive contracts that were signed. Which ones have you liked the most? Again, we don't really have a sample size at spring training, a couple weeks in, but on the surface, which signings did you like the most here?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Liam Hendriks signing, actually. Signing with the Chicago White Sox. And I always bring up this point. I get that people may be sick and tired of me bringing up Detroit Tigers points, but 2012, they make the World Series with a rotation of Scherzer, Verlander, Doug Fister, Anibal Sanchez. They didn't win that World Series. They got swept. And it's all because Phil Koch. Does anyone remember who Phil Koch is?
Yes, the former Yankees reliever.
Yeah. He was their mainstay in that pen, minus Jose Valverde, who was their closer. That's why they didn't win, is because they couldn't get a good enough bullpen. And I think that's where the White Sox, they needed that the most. They have their rotation. It's already set up. Lucas Giolito at the top. They're set. Could you imagine they still had Chris Sale? It wouldn't even be close. But yeah, to get Liam Hendriks, and again, Oakland is not the biggest, hey, let's go pay attention to the Oakland Athletics. Nobody says that out of the blue unless you live in California. So he really wasn't getting the most exposure out in Oakland, especially with all of their stadium problems and them wanting to move and, all of that. So for him to come to Chicago, be in a very competitive AL Central division with the Indians and the Twins, that's one of the more, a lot of people point out the Springers, Realmuto, and on the pitching side, Trevor Bauer, but Liam Hendriks moving to the Chicago White Sox, I think one of the more bigger moves that a lot of people aren't really focusing on too much because he is a bullpen guy. He is a closer. There isn't really a good chance that he's going to win the Cy Young. So that's where he kind of moves off to the side of these bigger signings.
And of another former Detroit Tiger there, Reece, James McCann. What do you think of him going from the White Sox to the Mets on a 4-year deal?
He can throw. He can't hit to save his life, but he can throw. He's one of the best throwing catchers that I've seen come through the Tigers organization. That's been their problem. We'll get to some honorable mentions as we move out throughout the show, but James McCann is one of the best defensive catchers, in my opinion, in the entire major leagues. He just understands the art of keeping the ball at home plate. You talk a lot about angling your body to try and keep the ball that's what you want to do. You want to position yourself, get down on your knees, and get to an angle where you're able to get the ball back to home plate so it's almost sitting on top of it, because not a chance in hell is a major league runner going to test a major league catcher's arm when the ball makes its way back and sits on top of home plate. And that's what you want to do. That's the fundamentals of blocking as a catcher, angling your body. And a lot of these catchers you see coming up, they keep their body straight, and that's where you get your wild pitches, and that's where you get the balls that sort of either make their way back to the mound or up the line, and that's when base runners advance. And with James McCann,
Gary Sanchez.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for
when
that.
you throw in the arm for James McCann and with his fundamentals behind the plate, if he can figure out how to hit, and a lot of catchers need to figure out how to hit, Danny Jansen. It's the Mets
One
are
hit,
set
one
behind
hit, Danny.
pitch. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why the Tigers they had to move on. They haven't found a catcher that had been able to hit, and that's what really kept them from being contenders. Is Alex Avila was meh, but he wasn't really, outstanding like JT Real Muto is. So if James McCann can hit 230 to 250 as a catcher, that's phenomenal. As a catcher, that's not a big name like Sanchez or Real Muto or, some of the bigger names in the big league. So if he can get to that and throw out, this is tough, throw out 30 to 50% of the runners, I think that's the major league average. I think he'll be above it. But if he can start with 35-40% of the runners he throws out, then the Mets are set behind the dish.
Yeah, I mean, he's 31 years old, signing a 4-year deal, so I mean that's it's a hefty price to pay for somebody that's already in their 30s. So we'll see if it works out for them defensively. But yeah, you're right about his offensive game. Colin, speaking of catchers, Colin Ward, president of the Left-Handed Catcher Association, what are you thinking for your top free agents here? The ones that you like the most on the top of the list here.
Well, I mean, the Bauer signing's really good for the Dodgers. I mean, it gives you that it gives you 100 wins and a very good chance to go back-to-back and win a World Series again with, following Kershaw, Buehler, David Price coming back. Then you got May. That's a solid rotation. That's the best rotation in baseball. But that's a kind of a gimme. I'm going to go with Jake Odorizzi, the recent signing for the Houston Astros. I think Odorizzi's a great signing for the Astros just because he brings you that extra depth pitcher. And he's no ordinary depth pitcher. He's a solid starter. 2020 he had a rough year. He was in and out, right, with injuries. But 2019, he was 15-7, 159 innings. That's a solid outing. That's a solid year for a guy like Jake Odorizzi. He would have been a guy that the Jays just missed out on, but it's a great signing for the Astros as well.
Yeah, I remember him coming up through the Tampa Bay Rays ranks, and he was obviously a highly coveted pitcher at the time. So he's 31 years old now, but again, could be another low-key good signing. But you wanted to mention George Springer, obviously, and what he brings to the Jays lineup. Again, he signed the biggest deal this year, 6 years, $150 million as a 31-year-old. That's a huge commitment from ownership to give a guy like that a contract.
Especially being from Ontario, all three of us know how often the Jays really don't spend that type of money on a player. So it shows that they believe in George Springer to be the future of their franchise, be the face of their franchise. Because you might see Bo Bichette get money like that when he comes up from the Jays because you're going to have to pay him a lot because I think he's a stud. But George Springer, they went all in on him. He might be the first face of their franchise since Josh Donaldson. And they didn't really even pay Josh Donaldson like this. They just picked, that was a big trade, but they didn't pay him like George Springer did. What Springer brings to the table, a leadoff guy that gets on base and can hit probably 40 home runs in this division. That's a studly pickup to have as your leadoff batter. Mm-hmm. He's kind of like a more all-around Batista because he's gonna get on base, right? Where Batista refused to hit to the opposite field. That was his problem about getting on base and his batting average. Sorry, Reece, but that. It was his problem. He didn't hit the opposite field. And nowadays with the shift in baseball, every team has a scouting report, a field chart on a certain hitter in the lineup. It's crazy. Yeah. He can get so I think that's where that's big for Springer. He can hit to all parts of the field. So does Cavan Biggio, so does Bo Bichette, so does Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So he fits that roster perfectly. 6 years is I think the Jays would like to go 5. Because, he's 31 years old. Giving him a 6-year deal is a little bit steep. But, it's fine. 6 years. You hope that last year you can get a little bit of value out of him because it's going to be tough. But I think a majority of the contract, at least 4 or 5 years, you're going to have a pretty good, productive George Springer in your outfield.
Yeah, you always have to overpay maybe a year or two than you'd like to in free agency. That's just the nature of the business. But do you think Springer quickly is going to be the leadoff guy for this team? Do you think that that's where he slots in as the best fit for him?
Yeah, I think you go Springer, Biggio, Bichette, Teoscar, Vladdy, Gurriel, Simeon, Rowdy. I'm missing one. You got Jansen.
Yeah, Danny
I think
Jansen's
that's a solid. You could flip flop Biggio and Simeon in the 2 spot,
but
2 and 6 spot. I just think Biggio fits the 2 spot a little bit better just because of what he brings to the table, and he's in that core. And plus, you have more of a future with Biggio than you do with Simeon.
Yeah, Springer's interesting. But Reece, you mentioned, obviously, James McCann. What do you think about JT Realmuto going back to the Philadelphia Phillies? 30 years old, 5-year deal, $115.5 million for those 5 years. Obviously, the catchers, it seems like there aren't as many elite catchers as maybe we've seen in the past. There might be, we're talking less than 10 maybe at this point as far as guys that can have a lot of pop and also play good defense. Obviously, JT Realmuto is basically, he's essentially the best catcher in the league according to a lot of people that cover the game. So what do you think about him going back to the Phillies on a 5-year deal? Were you kind of shocked that he went back after being a free agent here?
No, I wouldn't say I was really shocked. I was kind of surprised it took so long for him to go back. I kind of thought it would have been a situation where, okay, I'm here. Let's go. Like, you've got the pieces. You've got Harper, Didi Gregorius, really nice pickup for the Phillies. It was more of, wow, this didn't happen sooner than it did. But yeah, you talk about elite catchers, and again, listening to the Tigers broadcast, Kirk Gibson, phenomenal player. Little tough to listen to on the broadcast, but he knows what he's talking about. And he made the point perfectly, is catchers really aren't built up to be power guys. They're built up to play defense because they have to. If they can't play defense, then they don't have a job in this league. So, and that's where the point.
To add to that, JT Realmuto is also one of the most athletic catchers in baseball. I mean, he reminds me of a little bit of like how Buster Posey was in his prime.
Yeah. I mean, I just pulled up the stats quickly here for JT Realmuto. I thought he had a little bit more power than he did. He's only got 95 home runs in his MLB career, 732 games played over 7 years with the Marlins and Phillies. Obviously, in Miami, wasn't really set up too well to, be successful or win a playoff series or have any chance at a World Series. But when you have to invest in every aspect of your team possible in order to be successful and win a World Series. And we can bring this back to the Toronto Blue Jays back in 15-16 when we look at Troy Tulowitzki. He's pretty old at the time that that the Blue Jays picked him up at, but he could play defense. He could provide the leadership that the Blue Jays had not had in previous years. You talk about Jose Bautista. Obviously, they went out, got Josh Donaldson. Of course, this is all credit to Alex Anthopoulos before he moved on. It's just a matter of investing at every position. And I know that's tough to do. You're going to have someone who will be under par in your eyes. And with the Blue Jays, you could look at that as Danny Jansen being someone who has to really have a good year, or else you might look at the Jays in the front office and say, hey, we need to go invest in a catcher, kind of like the Phillies and White Sox did, as when the White Sox went out and got Yasmani Grandal. And for the Phillies, they've got their catcher, they've got their right fielder, they've got their shortstop, they've got half of an elite staff. I think Zach Wheeler is a really good pitcher. I think they need to go out and sign a couple more starters just to solidify their rotation. There's a couple more position players that I think they would have to go out and sign. Now, who those names are, no idea who they would target, but it's a matter of making some sort of investment at each position. And if they didn't sign JT Realmuto, they might as well have traded Bryce Harper, because that, if you're not going to go full out to try and win a World Series or try and win a playoff series for that matter with Bryce Harper while he's this age, Didi Gregorius while he's still at a decent age and playing at an elite level. So The investment makes sense for me. Again, just the matter of when it got done and that it didn't get done sooner is beyond me. And that could be Real Muto. He might have held out for more money, but I don't know that.
I'm in the
Yeah,
same
see what he
boat.
can get.
I'm in the same boat like that with DJ LeMahieu. I think that the Yankees needed him back. He's basically the only player that can hit for average on the team, which is sad. But again, a guy that he's a second baseman, but he played everywhere for this team last year with their injuries. And, you know, he signs a 6-year deal, $90 million. I mean, I know he's already 32 years old, and I'm sure the Yankees would have probably been, more content with a 4-year deal. But that's what happens in free agency. He wanted the extra 2 years, and you know, who knows how that'll work out. But kind of in the same boat there with Real Muto on just why did it take so long to get done? That was my question.
Well, and that's baseball too, right? With the age, you look at, and when we were talking about it as we begun the show, I didn't actually think there were that many guys who were 31 years old that were free agents. That was kind of funny, actually. But that's the thing about baseball instead of hockey. Hockey, we all cover the OHL. We see the guys like drafted at 18. McDavid was playing in the NHL, 18, 19 years old. Spencer Torkelson was just drafted first overall in 2020 by the Tigers. He's 22, and he won't be in the big leagues for another year and a half, 2 years. Mm-hmm. So that's where you have to look at it as it takes longer to get there just because hitting a baseball that comes in at 95 miles an hour is the hardest thing to do in all of sports, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So when you look at 31, 32, 33 years old, even 34 isn't really too bad as long as you're taking care of yourself. It's when you get up to the 38, 39, and 40 years old is when it starts to take a toll on your body. And especially as a catcher, JT Real Muto, his knees will not be even 90% by the time he's 38, 39, or 40. They'll be around 75 to 80%. And that's where you'll see him DH a little bit more, or they'll put him at first base. Right? So catchers, it's different than position players, obviously, but if you're in your early 30s, I really don't see that as old in sports.
Yeah, maybe more so in baseball. I think in hockey you're considered old because, like you mentioned, they're playing at 18, 19 years old. In baseball, that really doesn't happen. They're kind of coming up, like you mentioned, in their early to mid-20s there. So I think maybe 31 years old in baseball might not be considered as old as 31 in the NHL, for example. So I really like that point that you mentioned there. And again, the deterioration for catchers too. I mean, you look at the drop-off from when the top catchers, like you mentioned, like Joe Mauer, like how good he was for so many years, and then just the drop off was like a cliff, just completely gone, and that's what happens with catchers, right, Colin? I mean,
and also too with the teams, them realizing that, and they moved Mauer out of catching to first base actually a lot quicker than I thought they would. So again, teams recognize that and they say, "Hey, you're done catching, go to first base."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the thing I want to add with the Phillies, though, they have some young guys coming up that you got to watch for. Alex Bohm, their one prospect, is probably going to stick this year. I mean, he's getting on base a ton this spring. I mean, his batting average, I don't know what you look at that. It's only been 19 at bats, but it's 316, a home run, 4 RBI. He's big, he's 6'5", 218 pounds, third baseman. So there's a guy that's coming up. Those guys, and Mickey Moniak as well, who came up last year. Those two guys are going to stick with the club. Those two pieces are big, a center fielder and a third baseman. If those guys are good, you probably finish better than the Nationals if you're Philly. You're really not a bad team if those guys have the years like how a Bo Bichette, Kevin Biggio had last year for the Jays. If they get those type of numbers out of Moniak and Bohm, if you're a Philly fan, I know Philly fans, they're not really optimistic about their team.
Don't wear a visiting jersey.
They're quick to judge. Yeah, exactly. Don't be a visiting team's fan to go there. But if those guys have Bo Bichette, Kevin Biggio type numbers of last season, if you're the Philadelphia Phillies, you're looking at that last wild card spot as a reachable goal. Yeah. I mean, you built with Bryce Harper, you built this year with JT Real Muto. You're a good team. The pitching's big. I mean, Nola's got to be. I mean, he's got to lead that staff. After the top three pitchers, it kind of goes down. I mean, I took a lot of heat for fourth inning Vinny there, Vince Velasquez. I know Philadelphia. I mean, I know their pain being a Jays fan. You know what it's like having a guy that can only pitch 4 innings. I mean, last year was the first time in a year and a half that we had a guy pitch into the 7th inning. So we know what you're talking about. But I mean, if you can improve your I mean, obviously Spencer Howard's a recent pick for them. He won't be up probably this year, but they have pitching coming to where if they can have those guys, those utility guys, I mean, those position everyday players contribute this year, they got a shot. They might not be a legit World Series contender, but they'll be a playoff contender for sure. And plus, hopefully the year after they can get some pitching prospects up and go on a run. I think they're a year behind like how the Jays are.
Yeah, I think they're going to get there eventually. I mean, hopefully for Bryce
Same.
Harper. For Bryce Harper's sake, I hope they get there
those-
because that would be
Well, those memories of them being the Tampa Bay Rays in the World Series. I mean, Chase Utley, Jimmy Rollins, Ryan Howard. I mean, it sucks they didn't win with Roy Halladay the year before. Yeah, but the year before, like, it's too bad they didn't win with Halladay because, I mean, it would have been nice. But that team was, like, they were fun to watch. Victorino.
Yeah,
like,
Brad Lidge is their closer.
Yep, Brad
Yeah.
Lidge. Yep.
Cliffley.
So a few other guys I want to mention before we hit the break on the top of the list here are Justin Turner and Michael Brantley. Both of them 34, 36 years old, so they're both up there, both signing 2-year deals. Reece, which one do you like better in that regard? Justin Turner signing a 2-year $34 million deal or Michael Brantley signing a 2-year $32 million deal? And it was interesting with Michael Brantley is that he was rumored to have signed with the Toronto Blue Jays, and then that kind of in a day kind of just washed up and he went back to Houston, so that was kind of interesting. He didn't end up joining George Springer, another former Houston Astro, in Toronto. But which of those signings do you like better, Turner or Brantley, as both obviously solid players in the league?
Yeah, that was funny, eh? All the Jays fans and media. Oh, we got Brantley too? Hold on a second. No, you didn't. That was really funny. I found that hilarious. But I'm going to focus on Brantley the most because COVID spread. I mean, Justin Turner. After what he did with the World Series trophy, I'm not a huge fan of his anymore. But Michael Brantley, if Houston didn't get Michael Brantley back, you look at trading Correa and Altuve within the next 2 years. I think the Houston Astros are at that point anyways, even after getting Brantley, at the point where they're still trying to find ways to get to a World Series and win again. Whereas you have to look at it in reality, and the Tigers were guilty of this, of looking at yourselves and saying, within the next 3 to 4 years, do we really have a good shot at winning the World Series? And their competition, you can look at it, the Chicago White Sox, Minnesota Twins, and New York Yankees. Are you better than those 3 teams? Well, no, I don't think they're better than the Yankees. I don't think they're better than the Twins, and I don't think they're better than the White Sox. So you're the 4th team in the American League, in my opinion, are the Houston Astros. With Michael Brantley, you know what you get if you're Houston. You've seen him play with you for the last number of years. You understand what he's going to do at the plate. He's going to hit. He's going to hit with power, and he's going to try and do what he can in the outfield to stay relevant. Now, will they play him 162 games in the outfield? Not a chance in hell, because no one does that anymore. We'll even see 100 games in the outfield. Springer. Yeah, exactly. Will he see 100 games in the outfield? I don't know, because they might want to get that young talent up to see what they have for the next coming 3 to 5 years to try and see where their organization is at the major league level. So Michael Brantley will be an outfielder / DH, probably split half and half, I could see, but if they did not get back Michael Brantley, it hurts the Astros more if he signs somewhere else than if the Dodgers didn't sign Justin Turner. And that's why I focused on Brantley, because that's a more relevant signing in my opinion.
Okay. Colin, what do you think about those two? Turner
100%, 100% agree with Reece. I mean, Justin Turner, you kind of know what you're going to get with him from the Dodgers. I mean, the Dodgers loaded up on their pitching. They'll be fine. The Houston Astros are in a lot more trouble because they just lose George Springer, right? And they needed to replace him. So if they lost Michael Brantley, then they got to replace 2 outfielders from last season who are key outfielders for that team to make the playoffs. So that would have been a huge loss for them because Michael Brantley, he gets on base, he gets those clutch hits for you in your lineup. And you don't really have to worry about him. You just put him out there anywhere in the order, and he gets hits. That's the big thing about Michael Brantley. He did it his whole career, too. So that's why I agree with Reece. I mean, Michael Brantley's a great move. I mean, you needed to bring him back because if not, it's a longer year, especially if you would have lost him to the Jays, because probably the Jays and Astros will be battling for a wild card spot against each other.
Yep, I can see that.
That's another thing. If you lose your 2 key outfielders to a team that you're going to be competing for that playoff spot with, It's pretty tough to do.
Mm-hmm. So, again, those are kind of the big name signings, and this show is actually going longer than I expected, so we might just talk about offseason today. I think that's where we're heading. So we're going to take a break on today's show, and we're going to come back. We're going to talk to the boys about their thoughts on some of these, lesser signings and guys that can kind of be buy low candidates and be solid players, impact players for their teams this year. So stay right here. I'll be right back on the Full Count MLB podcast right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano, serving traditional-style Italian pizzas made with the freshest, top-quality ingredients. Loaded subs and their famous chicken wings. Winners of the Reader's Choice Diamond Award, 4 years running from Niagara this week for Best Pizza and Wings in Niagara Falls. Home of the best tray and wing combo in town for the price and quality. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., located on the corner of Drummond Road and Dunn Street. Available for call-ahead pickup or delivery at 905-374-4400. Make sure to like them on Facebook and view their website for their menu at carmine'spizzeria.ca. Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano. Way too good. As we all adjust to this new world that we're living in today, masks are now mandatory, and Niagara's own Custom PPE is Canada's leading face mask provider. Visit them online at customppe.ca and choose between several mask options with different colors and sizes. Add your organization, company, or team logo so you make your face masks unique. Available to purchase online 24/7 at customppe.ca and shipped within 1 week. They have the best prices and quickest turnaround in Canada, and no order is too big or too small. Also offering custom floor stickers as well as face and counter shields for your business or workplace. Visit customppe.ca and use the code ARMCHAIR at checkout for 20% off your custom or blank face mask today. Custom PPE, Canada's leading face mask provider. Attention job seekers, if you are currently looking for work in the Niagara region, you owe it to yourself to check out the services provided by the Niagara Employment Help Center, located at 6100 Thoroldstone Road, Niagara Falls, directly across from the Camisos Plaza. Their free services include resume and cover letter writing, community resource and referral information, local labor market information, job search strategies, assistance with clarifying employment training and career goals, employment counseling and job search support, second career information and registration assistance, and all their services are currently provided by appointment only. So give them a call at 905-358-0021 or visit their website at ehc.on.ca, the Niagara Employment Help Center. This Employment Ontario program is funded by the Government of Ontario.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Full Count MLB podcast right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Brandon Caputo alongside Reece Dumaney and Colin Ward back with you here. And this segment today is brought to you by the Spicy Olive Bar and Grill, authentic and unique Italian-style food from right here in Niagara Falls, Ontario. Check out their Facebook and Instagram pages for updates to view their adjusted hours and to try their awesome new takeout menu. Again, Spicy Olive Bar and Grill. Don't forget the E at the end of that, .com. So, guys, let's continue on with our off-season talk here and the biggest moves. We obviously talked about the biggest moves already, but let's talk about some other guys that you kind of further down the list that you think are going to have an impact and be very good buy low candidates this year for their respective clubs. Reece, let's start off with you. What are some of the guys you're looking at lower down the list that weren't signed to maybe the biggest contracts, but you think might have a big impact on their clubs this year?
Number one, I'm going Kyle Schwarber. Leaves Chicago, goes to Washington, and I don't know if they're chasing another World Series, but he's someone that can help a lot get back to the World Series. Kyle Schwarber,
utility.
Yeah, he can hit. He can play defense. He can get injured, but if he stays healthy, then the Washington Nationals have hit a home run with this one. I think that was, for the amount of money that they got him for, I'm just gonna scroll over a bit, $10 million. Obviously that's a lot of money, but it's a guy that will come into your organization right away and fit in perfectly, because his success with the Cubs and the amount of success the Washington Nationals have had in previous years, not last year, it wasn't as great last year. Obviously, they didn't have Ryan Zimmerman, but for him, he's the one name down the list that kind of stands out to me as a little bit under the radar and good signing, if you will. Also, I know Colin will discuss this, but Jock Peterson going to the Cubs. I think the Cubs had to replace Kyle Schwarber, and Jock Peterson, in my opinion, is an upgrade. 5 home runs in the spring already. So those are the two names that stand out first to me. And I know Colin will touch on Peterson a little bit more, but I have those two as kind of down the list, low-key impact.
Okay.
Yeah, Jock Peterson would be my number 2, just because what Jock Peterson brings to the table in Chicago is big. I mean, if the Cubs have any chance, they need Jock Peterson to be the upgrade over Kyle Schwarber. I mean, the problem is Kyle Schwarber was an effective player for the Cubs for a few years. The only thing is with Kyle Schwarber, he just got hurt at key times. I mean, it hurt the Cubs. I mean, last year the Cubs weren't as good without him on the field. I mean, Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, those guys struggled as well throughout the year. And I mean, with Jock Peterson, it gives you that bat. You know, he's going to be in the lineup. He never really had a lot of injury problems with the Dodgers, right? He's going to be in the lineup every day. You know what you're going to get from him. And that's the big. It's an easy signing for me, for the Cubs to pick him up. That's a big one. But my number 1 is the Detroit Tigers. Reece, you'll like this. No more Mazzara. Mazzara, he's only 25 years old. I mean, $1.75 million for 1 year. Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect deal. That's a perfect deal for the Tigers. Both sides. I mean, Mazzara in Texas was one of the best young players coming up in baseball alongside Soto in Washington. So, I mean, Mazzara is a great pickup. He's going to get on base. I mean, I don't like how you said, you don't really look at the batting average. I mean, he gets on base. You know what you're going to get from him. He's good in the outfield, tall, big, lanky, 6'4", 215 pounds. I mean, prototypical outfielder body type. It's just, I think he fits that Tigers organization perfectly. And I mean, the nickname for those player weekend jerseys, he might have one of the best nicknames, the Big Chill. I can see that being all over Comerica Park when fans are back, the Big Chill. Or every hit, the Big Chill. I mean, that's the chill factor. So that's a big one.
The chill factor. I like that.
Yeah, I'm ecstatic for him to see him on the Tigers. I mean, I saw what he was like in Texas. I looked at him in his prime. Or not, well, he's not even in his prime yet, but I looked at him in his key season. Last year he had an off year, but a lot of people had off years in the shortened season. Nobody really knew what was going on. This year, I mean, it's going to be exciting to see what he can bring to the table in Detroit, because he's going to get a lot of opportunity. And if he has a good year, you might be looking at a J.D. Martinez, Nick Castellanos type player for the Tigers in the corner outfield, which, I mean, with Spencer Torkelson coming up in a year and a half to 2 years, like Reece said, you got a chance, right, to be competitive. They had the pitching staff, the Tigers. They had the pitching prospects. I mean, It's no cakewalk in the Central this year, because the Tigers are going to pitch their way in ball games, which is great to see. I think picking up Mazzara, it gives you that bat. He'll get some RBIs other than Miguel Cabrera, and that's going to be nice. It's going to take the pressure off Cabrera, and he could be around for the future if he has a good year.
Speaking of pitching, Colin, you also mentioned Charlie Morton to the Atlanta Braves from the Tampa Bay Rays. You think that that's a nice signing for them as well?
I like that signing. That's a nice move, just because it's that veteran starter. I mean, teams always look at, when they're adding pitching, in free agency, they always look at, they got to get the big name guy. They got to get a top 3 free agent. They got to get Trevor Bauer. They got to get Jake Odorizzi. But Charlie Morton is a perfect guy. I mean, they're not paying him like a fourth starter, but for Atlanta, you have Soroka, you have those young pitchers there, where if you had Charlie Morton to be your fourth starter, you're looking at a possible World Series contending team. I mean, I think they're better than the Mets. In my opinion, in that division, I think the Braves win the division still. I think all around their lineup's better than the Mets. I think their staff is going to pitch them in games. They're very underrated. I think Soroka has a monster comeback year. I mean, bias, he's Canadian, but I think he's going to have a monster year this year, Soroka. So I think Atlanta wins that division. I think Charlie Morton being your fourth starter certainly helps your cases to be a World Series contender, because you're going to look at it, what it's going to come down to. You could have a chart on that. If you're playing a 4-game series against the Mets in late September, you're going to set it up that way. So you might be looking at a fourth start between Taijuan Walker for the Mets and a Charlie Morton. I mean, I would take my chances with Charlie Morton just because he's that veteran starter. He's been there before. So I would take my chances with Charlie Morton over Taijuan Walker in that game.
And I'm going to ask you guys a question here. Two 31-year-olds, which one do you think has a better season this year? One signing a 1-year deal, one signing a 2-year deal. We have Jackie Bradley Jr. going from the Boston Red Sox to the Milwaukee Brewers, or we have Andrelton Simmons going from the LA Angels to the Minnesota Twins. Which of those 31-year-olds do you think has the better opportunity? Obviously, Jackie Bradley Jr. a few years back with the Red Sox had a massive year, and they probably should have traded him that year. They probably could have got a boatload for him because he never reached that potential again. And then Andrelton Simmons, who was regarded as one of, if not the best defensive shortstop in baseball. So what do you think of those two 31-year-olds? Who do you think would be a better signing, Simmons or Jackie Bradley Jr.?
I'm going to go Simmons. I think Minnesota's going to be the better team, and I think Simmons is going to be better for that batting order than Jackie Bradley Jr. would be in a Milwaukee order. I mean, Christian Yelich is going to have a big year, but Jackie Bradley Jr. isn't going to hit around Christian Yelich in the lineup. Where Andrelton Simmons in your sixth spot in the lineup, he'll have guys like Josh Donaldson and Nelson Cruz in front of him on base or getting hits, so he'll be in opportunities to get big hits in games. So I'm going to go Andrelton Simmons.
Reece, what do you think?
Ooh, I'm going opposite. I like Jackie Bradley Jr. Yeah. Just what he does in the outfield. And we talked about this with our OHL show. We covered the Regina Pats Saskatoon Blades game on Sunday. And just about their one player, Tristan Robbins, with his skates, using his legs. Jackie Bradley Jr., he's not going to steal you the most bases. I looked up his stats. He's only got 60 stolen bases in his career, but he's not a good tracker, though. Yeah, with having speed, it's not just about stealing bases to get you runs and win ball games. It's about using your eyes and your speed together. Yeah. And in those opportunities where, say, JBJ, and that's kind of my I guess everyone calls him that just to make it a little shorter, but he's on first base. He's the only one on base. And a lot of people look at this as an underrated play, but base hit to right field. He's getting to third 85 to 90% of the time that happens. And that, again, I mentioned stolen bases. They're important. Do they win you a lot of games by manufacturing a lot of runs? They can. But it's taking the extra base when the opportunity presents itself. It's getting home from second on a base hit to center field. You know, with a little bit of slower guys, you may not get there if it's hit right at the outfielder, but depending on who it is throwing the baseball, Jackie Bradley Jr. is going to take that extra base more times than not. And that's the advantage of having JBJ is he's going to play great defense, kind of like Kevin Pillar. He dives, he lays out, he makes those really nice plays, and he's going to win the Brewers a few more games because he can run. He's not a base clogger. He can move. If there's a double, he can score from first base.
Well, Reece, we've played with guys growing up that there's guys that we know that are high energy guys that can take that extra base. If you see if the ball gets hit in the gap and the outfielder's jogging the ball, it's an easy triple for the guy. He turns doubles into triples. Yeah. We've played with guys like that. And we know how fun it is to have those guys on our team, and we know how hard it is to play against those guys. So that's a good point. Jackie Bradley Jr. is a high motor, and he thinks the game well. Yeah. So that's big.
So the last one here, 3 elder statesmen that are returning to their same clubs from last year, and I want to get your thoughts on which one you think will have the biggest impact. We've got Yadier Molina, 38 years old, returning to the St. Louis Cardinals. You have Adam Wainwright, who's 39, returning to St. Louis as well. And the other one that I wanted to mention was 40-year-old Nelson Cruz, who is returning as DH to the Minnesota Twins for one more year.
That's hard.
I believe Reece has talked about Nelson Cruz in an earlier episode. Out of Cruz, Molina, and Wainwright, which of those elder statesmen do you think has the chance of having the best season returning with their club?
Plus, I just mentioned Nelson Cruz, too, with Simmons batting behind him. Oh, that's tough.
I'm going Molina. And
he's looked good in spring. He has looked good in spring.
He's
throwing the ball real quick down to first. Catcher, eh?
Oh, he's already thrown someone out at second base. So, I knew we'd probably get to the topic of Yadier Molina eventually, But I brought it up anyways. I have the roster for the St. Louis Cardinals, the active roster. And without Yadier Molina, their catching options are, and these names may be fun to pronounce. They've got Ivan Herrera, depending on how you say it. You've got Ali Sanchez. And there's one more, Andrew Kisner. Have either of you heard of those three names?
Well, yeah, they're catching. I have not, but their catching has really dropped off. I mean, behind Yadier Molina.
This is what I've heard.
I was
those
thinking
guys.
the same thing.
Without Molina, yeah, I know. Without Yadier Molina, do they even have a chance? Despite having Goldschmidt, despite having Nolan Arenado, do they really have that big of a chance to beat the Dodgers or the Padres or the Braves without Yadier Molina?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Okay, so, and I know this is an upgrade, and no, they probably don't, and I know it's not a big upgrade, but so let's say Alejandro Kirk for the Jays. He's having a heck of a spring training so far. I think he makes a team as the backup catcher. So, if that's the case, Reece McGuire goes on waivers. You think the Cardinals possibly pick Reece McGuire up to be the backup? Get defensively. He's not going to play. He
Major
league
play experience.
Yadier is going to. Yeah, I think that's an option. I think that's the thing that the Jays are
that's
fearing.
actually a good point.
Because Kirk has to make the team. He's hitting too good. Yeah. You can't have your catchers batting under 2. And with the Alejandro Kirk batting 5+ right now, I mean, he's getting on base. He hasn't struck out. Like, he's not striking out like the other guys, other catchers are. I think he's got to make the team. The effect he has on your roster, Alejandro Kirk, is massive to what Reece McGuire. The backup catcher, Reece, as we both know, the backup catcher really doesn't have a big effect on your team unless they're good.
Yeah.
And with Alejandro Kirk being good, it's an upgrade. You got to do it. He might be, honestly, by the end of this year, he could be your number 1 catcher. You saw what Robbie Ray said about pitching to Alejandro Kirk. He said he loves it. He said he loves pitching to Alejandro Kirk. I mean, you got that low strike zone, right? And he really gets down to the worst side of the ball. So with Yadier Molina, I mean, Reece McGuire is an option for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I like that. And that's where I'm a huge fan of the Rule 5 draft is if the guy's lights out and he's playing unreal, and a perfect example, Akil Baddoo,
out of options.
One of the greatest names I've ever heard. He is playing phenomenally for the Detroit Tigers in the spring right now. Rule 5 pick. Yeah. They picked him up from, I'm pretty sure it was the Twins. And he's got to make the team or else he can be taken by anyone.
Free agent.
And that's what makes the Rule 5 draft and all these picks so intriguing is they've got so much talent, and if they're not on the team, then other teams have a chance to pick them up, and that just makes the league a lot more competitive. So Reece McGuire having that option, if he doesn't make the Blue Jays and being open to anyone else to pick him up, because he's a catcher that
he would apply to that Rule 5 draft.
Yeah, he's played in the major leagues. He's played in some big games for the Jays when Danny Jansen has just been in a cold spell and he can't figure out a way to hit or do anything defensively. Like, I think that's a great pickup for the Cardinals if you're wanting to maybe give Yadier Molina only 90 games behind the plate or 100 games behind the plate just to save him for that run at a World Series title with him.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe that's the Cardinals are trying to do. They're trying to claim a catcher off waivers from somebody. Maybe that's their plan. We got to get a backup catcher from somebody.
Well, there's going to be chances there. There's going to be chances because you hear stories all the time, and I have a good story too. Chris Robinson, who listens to the show, I was very fortunate to be able to train with him growing up as a kid in London at Centerfield Sports. He told me a good story, and hopefully we can get him on the show soon and talk about this. He told me a good story about with the Cubs, how he would have made the team, but the other catcher was out of options, and he had options. So unfortunately, he was the odd man out because he had options. And I just think Alejandro Kirk is playing too good right now to be sent down even with options. I think the positives are way above. I don't think Alejandro Kirk does anything in a shortened AAA season. No one knows what the minor league season is going to be like. And you're not going to carry 3 catchers this year just because with the way the pitching is, you're going to need extra pitchers where the Jays are going to run 6 to 9 start relievers in that pen all year for the most part because a longer season, more innings, and they want to make it less taxing on their starting staff. So you're going to need more pitching. So if you go a 3-man bench, I mean, Randall Grichuk's on your bench, Joe Panic on your bench, or
well, that's the thing too. They have an extra spot this year, right? 26-man roster, not 25.
Yeah. So then a 4. I don't know though if you spend 3 on a catcher.
We also don't know. I haven't seen anything. Is there a taxi squad again? I haven't seen anything about it.
I haven't saw anything. But you'd have to clear waivers to go to the taxi squad, wouldn't you? Because I think last year you had to clear waivers. So either way, McGuire would have to clear waivers. Mm-hmm. But I just think this year, even if it goes by one guy, you don't really need 3 catchers. And I think that can mess up the staff in a way too.
Yeah. It's the same situation.
1 week you're throwing to one guy.
Yeah.
Next week you're throwing to the other. Marco Estrada.
Same situation as the 3 goaltenders in the NHL. You have to have a minimum of 1 goaltender on your taxi squad. It's the same situation. Is that 3rd goaltender really going to see game action? No. Unless there's an injury.
Not until injuries. Yeah.
Yeah.
He does if you're Buffalo, but that's another story.
Yeah. What was that stat? Carter Hutton and Johansson have 1 win in their last how many games?
Yeah, we're not going to get into that on this show.
Hey, you know what?
No, I'm just saying.
Jimmy
No hockey talk.
Jimmy Howard didn't have a win since October 29th of last year. So I feel your pain.
Thank
Cheers,
you,
buddy.
I appreciate that. Lastly, the last name I wanted to bring up, actually a couple names before we wrap up the show today, is Corey Kluber and James Paxton. Obviously, both these guys have had solid careers. Paxton, obviously, with his time with Seattle the first time around, was why he was so coveted by the Yankees to give up a lot to get him at the time, the Big Maple out there in Seattle. And then Corey Kluber, obviously the former Cy Young winner for the Cleveland Indians, who has now played on the Texas Rangers, now going to the Yankees. Do you see both those guys having impacts on their respective staffs, as obviously the Yankees and the Mariners need some help in the rotation? So do you think that those were both buy low kind of signings, 1-year deals for guys that have had solid careers, especially Corey Kluber, a former Cy Young winner?
Yeah, both. I mean, I think Corey Kluber has a bigger effect on the Yankees than James Paxton has. I'm thinking Ty on the other trade than Paxton has on the Mariners. I mean, the Mariners are going to be good with Paxton. I mean, he's going to be their guy, I think. But with the Yankees, with Corey Kluber, you kind of could hit lightning in a bottle with Kluber. You know he's got the stuff. I mean, he went to Texas, right? I mean, Texas didn't have the best of years, but now he's in that Yankees organization. He's not in the Texas Rangers organization. He's in the New York Yankees organization, who consistently develop pitching, develop players that turns into Aaron Judge. I mean, they know what they get when they get guys. They develop probably better than any team. That's why they're always competitive. The Yankees never the Yankees never rebuild. They just retool. Yeah. And I think that's the type of move with Corey Kluber. I think that what he brings to the table, he has 3 nasty pitches that come with him too. And I mean, to be a starter, if you have 3 good pitchers, you can have a good year. So I like what he brings to the table. I really like what Kluber's going to do there. I think he sticks. I think he has a good year, and he probably gets paid the year after because he's in the Yankees system. And the Yankees, you know what happens when you have a good year playing for the Yankees, you get paid. If you don't, you get waived. It is what it is. It's a low-risk signing, high reward. I like it.
He is 35, but Reece, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think the situation with Kluber is a lot better than Paxton. And I'm going to just talk about Paxton for a couple seconds, because the Seattle Mariners, you never really know what the heck they are, because they never really go for it, but they also never really tank. So you're kind of like...
They're like 2000 Blue Jays.
Yeah, you're
2010 Blue Jays. What are they?
Yeah, what's going on here? They're third to fifth best in the AL West, and they're probably not even the third best. You could probably put them 4th, 5th best in the league, and that's kind of, like you mentioned, the 2000 to 2010 Blue Jays. They're a bottom 2 team in their division, and you don't really know what's going on, and they're just kind of there. When the Blue Jays come to town, that ballpark gets pretty loud, but other than that, it's obviously it's big buzz in that city right now. They're getting an NHL franchise come this fall, and sports is going to start to
quarterbacks on the trade block.
Their sports are going to start to get a little bit more relevant as you kind of see how the city is going. But for the Mariners, getting Paxton is kind of a sign of, is he really just coming back to mentor these young pitchers, because they've got Kyle Lewis, who's going to be phenomenal. He already had a great year last year. So Kyle Lewis is the building block that they're going to have to try and figure out their franchise around. And for James Paxton, will he be around when the Mariners evidently or ultimately decide to actually go for it because they have a pretty good team? No, he probably won't be. It'll be Kyle Lewis leading the way. He'll be the leader of the team, the captain. He'll be the one that will drive the boat for the club. So James Paxton, he's still an effective pitcher. He's going to get wins. He's going to, eat up innings for your team and give your bullpen a rest when they need it. But he's not a part of the future. Whereas Corey Kluber, like you mentioned, Colin, the Yankees don't rebuild. They're retooling. Corey Kluber is a retool. He's a fifth starter. At this point in a career, he's the fifth starter, possibly fourth. You never know. But he's here to win. Corey Kluber has shown that he can win ball games. He can win big ball games. And he can, again, eat up innings like Paxton. So with the Yankees, you're obviously looking to win. You're favored to win the division. Some people might say you're favored to win the American League. So go out and win. He's there to win, whereas Paxton's there to win not majority of the games for the Mariners, but out of the starters, more than likely he's going to win the most ball games.
Yeah.
Hopefully 15 wins you get out of Paxton.
You bring up a good point too. Like they signed Robinson Cano, and then you're like, okay, they're going for it, but then they were just stuck in mediocrity.
Are they though?
Like I don't know what they're doing. I mean,
exactly.
And it's a continued it's just like a washing machine with the Mariners. Like you think that they're going to go for it, then they're not, and they sell, then they buy again. They're just the never-ending Seattle Mariners washing machine. I feel bad for their fans out there. They've waited a long time. But
they were lucky with Griffey, but now they're just not there.
Yeah. Even Edgar Martinez and A-Rod, they've had a lot of good. Obviously, the King, Felix Hernandez, was good for so many years. But it seems like they have one or two good, elite players, but they never have the full roster to go for it. And that's a shame for the Mariners because they've had so much elite talent and, Hall of Fame talent come through that organization, but just not enough depth, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And speaking of the Yankees, I'm most intrigued to see Jameson Taillon. I don't know, Brandon, you're a Yankees fan. I don't know how much clip you saw on him, but I saw a couple throughout the week on Jameson Taillon. I mean, I'm on the Taillon train right now. I think he's going to be a stud to the Yankees. And Reece, you mentioned that last week, I think, about Taillon. So then after I did some homework and looked up some Taillon, bullpen sessions. And, I mean, he has, honestly, other than his fastball, he has 3 quality pitches that gets strikeouts. I mean, as a pitcher, quality pitches, it's nice when you can get that break on velocity. And I mean, you can get that break in the ball. And I mean, he hits a back door on the plate like nothing to righties. And he has that cross plate action too, and downhill action, which is nice. He has both. And when you can get that, you get a lot of strikeouts. And when you're a pitcher, you look at that. I mean, the way your ball breaks, I know you go there I know it sucks having long at bats and you go there to pitch the contact and stuff, but when you're Jameson Taillon, you're playing in that ballpark. When your ball moves like that, you're going to get a lot of strikeouts. It's just going to come naturally with the amount of movement on the ball he has. And his fastball actually moves left to right or right to left. His fastball it has that tail on it, which is nice to see. I mean, being left-handed, you get that. A lot of lefties have that natural tail, but I mean that's cool to see that he has it on the other side.
Well, and if your pitches don't move, you don't have a job in the big leagues. So the fact that
or you got to throw 100 plus.
Yeah, that's very true.
Or your Bartolo.
And even that doesn't work out.
That's what helps out with Taillon, right? Despite having 2 Tommy John surgeries, his pitches are still moving as if he just got drafted coming to the big leagues. Like, he's a second overall pick. Let's not forget that. He's a former second overall pick. So he's got talent. It's just he can't pitch because his arm is screwed up.
He looks in good shape.
The Pittsburgh Pirates, what a shock. So the Yankees have Taillon and Garrett Cole, 2 former high picks of the Pittsburgh Pirates on their roster.
And they also traded away Jose Bautista before he started to come on in the big leagues.
The Pittsburgh Pirates, they're a story. We could have a whole episode on them. But with that said, guys, we're fresh out of time. So that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. We basically recapped all of the entire most of the free agents that were signed this offseason, and some of the guys that the boys are looking at as far as buy low candidates that might have big impacts on their rosters this year. So with that said, we're going to get into more stuff next week. What did you want to say something before we wrap up?
1 sec. Yeah, 1 sec. Also, another one for the Yankees is Davy Garcia. I mean, him and Alek Manoah went off yesterday. I just wanted to mention that quickly. Alek Manoah, 7 strikeouts for the Jays. I mean, the Yankees didn't have their quality roster, but 7 strikeouts. And him and Simeon Woods Richardson, for you Blue Jay fans, had a heck of an outing yesterday.
Little
I just want to add
update.
that.
Yeah.
And Garcia as well for the Yankees is another guy that they'll have in their rotation who's going to be legit.
We'll talk
Just want to
more.
add that.
We'll talk more Jays next week. But with that said, folks, that's going to wrap it up for today's off-season episode of the Full Count MLB podcast, right here in the Armchair GM Sports Network. As always, I'm one of your hosts of this podcast. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter at Caputo13 with a Canadian Z. As well, you can follow my co-host first, Reece Dumaney at Reece Dumaney, and as well, Colin Ward at Colin Ward _14. Again, still taking applications for his left-handed catcher association. Make sure you're DMing him for that as well. And finally, to you viewers out there and baseball fans for taking along this episode with us on this off-season episode on the Full Count MLB podcast on the Armchair GM Sports Network by sports fans for sports fans. We'll see you guys next week for more baseball talk.